Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of Ami Sites. I am Lynn Ozer, and I am the co-host of this program along with Ami Kassar. Today, our special guest is the one and only Joey Coleman. Joey is an award-winning speaker and author of 2 Wall Street Journal bestsellers, How Not to Lose a Customer in 100 Days and How Never to Lose an Employee in 100 Days. We want to hear all about everything that's in this book, all 100 ways. I doubt we'll cover all of them, but welcome, Joey. We're so happy to have you here with us today.
Lynn, it is my pleasure to be here. Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited about our conversation.
Us too. So you have 2 books, I understand. Tell us the highlights.
So my first book is called Never Lose a Customer Again, and it details an 8-phase methodology for thinking differently about the interactions you have with your customers to take a one-time buyer to being a long-term loyal customer. My second book is called Never Lose an Employee Again. And ironically enough, it applies a similar 8-phase methodology to look at how you can take your new hire and turn them into a long-time, valuable, engaged, committed member of your team. Both of these books find their foundation in 2 key concepts. Number 1, humans are humans are humans. And if we know a little bit about how humans think and feel and operate, we can create experiences for them that will keep them coming back for more. The second piece that they find their fundamental foundings in is that you have 100 days to get this right. The first 100 days of a customer relationship or an employee relationship is the most dispositive time in the entire relationship in terms of the lifetime value of the relationship, whether they will stay around, whether they will be committed, whether they will be engaged. So you just got to remember, treat your humans well in the first 100 days, and the rest has a tendency to take care of itself.
Interesting. I was going to say you ascribe to that, Ami, because it seems like your experience with multi-funding fits right in there. Either they leave after 3 months or so, or they stay forever. So you must be living this concept. What do you think?
I think saying difficult to replicate is probably a gross understatement, right? It's the biggest challenge I would posit facing businesses today. What I think most organizations have failed to fully comprehend is that the changes that occurred globally during the COVID pandemic as it relates to employee expectations from their employers, employees' expectation for how they define work, employees' expectation of where they go to work, as well as the employer's expectations for all of those things, changed in a way that we have not seen in the history of humanity. You know, when I make that bold of a statement, some people say, well, Joey, what about the Industrial Revolution? Well, the Industrial Revolution is still not evenly distributed around the world, right? There are still countries in the world that haven't even experienced the Industrial Revolution and are trying to catch up now, whereas there are other countries around the world who are very far into that life cycle. Well, Joey, what about, the advent of electricity? That certainly made a big difference. Again, electricity doesn't exist everywhere on the planet today, so it's still a work in progress in many ways. But what we see having changed in terms of the expectation of employees globally is there is a different belief about where we should work, when we should work, and why we should work now in the present era than at any other time. And I think the employers who are saying, well, we've got to get everybody back into the office. I've got to be able to see the people that are reporting to me and who are working for me. As a general rule, that tells me one of 2 things. Either you are in a very hands-on business for which remote work is not an opportunity. For example, you're a chiropractor. They haven't figured out a way to do chiropractic adjustments over the internet yet. So you got to go be in the room with the chiropractor while they're making the physical adjustment to your body. Additionally, it shows that maybe it's the case that you have not hired the most talented, qualified people possible. Why? Because if you are only limiting the scope of who you might hire to people that can drive to your office or your place of business every day, you're at what, a 30-mile, 50-mile radius from your principal place of operation? We live on a planet where there are folks on all 7 continents who are smart, who are talented, who have the capability to contribute to our businesses. And if we are putting a geographical limiter on our businesses that isn't required based on the type of business we offer, we might, and I would posit very well are, missing out on top talent around the world.
For sure.
I think it is an evolving playbook. It is something that is newer in the sense that many global conglomerates and global organizations have dealt with employees in different time zones for decades, some even for centuries. But for a team of 5 people or 10 people to have employees in multiple different countries in multiple different time zones, that's a rather new scenario for business leaders to be dealing with. The playbook is certainly not well established, and if anything, is still evolving. To your point, though, I think one of the interesting things that many organizations overlook is they don't think intentionally or strategically about how they are building analog connections with these digital team members who might only know us through Zoom or through Teams or through phone calls or internet video connections. We're missing the opportunity to have those physical interactions. One of the things that we're seeing with a lot of organizations is because they are seeing often a significant cost saving in terms of salary when they are hiring people in jurisdictions other than, for example, in the United States or in Europe. What I'm encouraging leaders to do is take some of that cost saving of not having to pay them local wages or local salaries, take some of that cost saving of not having to have a formal office space with a desk and a computer and lights on for them, and put that money directly towards paying to either fly them in for team meetings or paying to fly the team to them for meetings every once in a while. Now, if you've got a team of 15 people and one's in the Philippines, yes, I would recommend bringing the person from the Philippines to the United States. However, as a business grows and we start to have teams distributed in a greater swath across the world, the ability from a recruiting point of view to say, if you come work for us, we have an annual meeting in a different country every year. And the longer you're with us, the more you'll get to travel the world. Well, now you're creating a marketing tool in your business operations of how you connect with your team.
It's a great idea. Certainly appeals to a lot of people.
Absolutely. And here's the thing, lots of times we don't even ask. Lots of leaders, I'm not saying you, but lots of leaders don't even stop to say, well, I don't know if that person would be interested in it. And what we know from the research is there is a subset of employees who not only would be interested in doing it, but would be quicker to accept a job offer from your organization if they knew that the opportunity to travel to the United States for a week every year or twice a year was part of the job. That gets them something that they're excited to do in addition to work for you. And so my theory always is when it comes to employee experience, the organizations that are going to be the employers of choice in the next 50 years are the organizations that care as much about what happens between 5 p.m. and 9 a.m. in their employees' lives as they care about what happens between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. What I mean by that, obviously, is what is going on in their personal life, with their family, with their friends, with their goals, their hobbies, etc., that we as employers can augment, support, encourage, that allows them to lead an even more fulfilled life. That's what I think the typical employee rather, has always looked for, but is increasingly expecting from their employer. When we first start out, lots of times we know everyone who works for us. We know their story. We might have met their spouse, their significant other, their children, their parents, whoever it is that is most important to them outside of the work environment. But once we get above a dozen employees, that becomes more challenging. And at each point above that, 50 employees, 100, 150, 300, 1,000, that becomes a job in and of itself, which is why we see so many organizations historically start to develop an HR department or a human resources department or a talent department. The problem I have with many of those departments globally is that in the last 50 years, those departments have been focused on compliance instead of culture. Now, that's a sweeping stereotype statement, but it applies to most organizations, right? In most organizations, those folks are about administration of benefits. They're about managing PTO. They're about, making sure payroll is processed appropriately, as opposed to how can we create connection with our employees, to your point, to know about their families, to make sure that their life at home is equally going as well and as smoothly and as positively as their life at work.
Well, it's hard. In a lot of situations, I think employees want to keep it separate. So you don't always get an opportunity to know what's going on in their personal lives. Like some people use work to remove themselves from their personal life or to take a break from their personal life or,
Or maybe even escape from their personal life,
right.
Lynn.
And
Absolutely.
right. So, but, I think there's a line that you have to be careful not to cross. Not that you couldn't, I think people always appreciate when employers acknowledge that there is life outside of the office and that needs time and attention. And whether or not they choose to share what they do during that time or even what they need during that time with the employee is something that I think you have to be careful about.
Lynn, I absolutely agree with you that you want to be careful about leaning into these conversations. I think many leaders have over indexed on being careful about to the conversation to the point where they don't have the conversation. They refuse to acknowledge that the employee has a life outside of work. So many employers think nothing about asking an employee to stay late for a conference call, to respond to their emails when they're out of the office, to be available when they're on vacation, to just zoom in for the weekly stand up. You can be gone the rest of the time, but make sure you're there for that. They're so quick to make those type of requests of their employees without ever creating a space for the employee to come forward and say, my child got the lead in the school musical. I need to leave work early today. Or I'm dealing with, an elderly parent who's going through a medical procedure next week. I know I wasn't able to give advance notice, but we just found out. So I'm going to need to take a half day on Tuesday. When we don't understand what's going on with our employees outside of work, we don't create the space that I know many leaders have to embrace that aspect of the reality of their life and show them how we're there for them. And a big piece of this, to be candid, comes not only from asking them, but for being willing to go first. What do I mean by that? Well, all too often, leaders are very quick to ask of their employees, so what did you do this weekend? Where are you going on vacation? Do. But they're not as quick to volunteer what they did this weekend. They're not as quick to share what's going on in their life, not only the positives, but the negatives, the struggles. And what I have found is that as leaders step into that place where they're willing to be more open and vulnerable with their teams about what's going on in their personal lives or their life outside of work, the team rises to the occasion. It also creates permission for a team member to say, I'm also having a pseudo similar problem in this aspect of my personal life. And now everyone's getting to put more of their life on the table for the discussions that necessarily ensue.
I'll tell you guys
It's very interesting.
a fun story, but there's a woman on my team who we've been together like 14 years, and she went on vacation to Europe last week, and I decided she was going on vacation. And I very deliberately, absolutely cut her off any email that she would regularly be to give her a break. And she was about having a heart attack. She
Sure.
She texted me a couple of times like, is everything okay? Have you cut me off my email? And I would just send her like funny laughing emojis to her text. But I wanted her to have a vacation. And I understand because we're all passionate about our work, how that might be hard to, like, I would have a hard time if I went away for a week and I'd kill somebody. Okay. But it would be healthy for me.
Yes, you would.
Right. And here's the beautiful thing about this story, Ami. I so appreciate you sharing this. There's what we want and what we need.
Right.
And all the research that has ever been done shows that employees need time away from work.
Correct.
They need time to decompress. They need time to not be in the onslaught. And the problem is we have dramatically increased the number of connection points that an employee has to their employer, especially over the last 50 years with the advent of electronic communications, right? Emails and text messages notably. And so what has happened is if we as the leaders aren't taking the charge on helping create those boundaries for our employees, by the way, we can do it for ourselves too. But at the very least, let's start with it for our employees. We're not going to get the full benefit of our team members that we could. In fact, quick story. One of my good friends and clients runs an accounting firm on the East Coast of the United States. Now, I say this respectfully to any accountants that might be listening. There is no such thing as an accounting emergency. Okay? I hate to break it to you. You're not an ER doctor. Yes, there may be a problem, but the problem at 4:30 p.m. on Tuesday is probably not going to be any worse at 10 a.m. on Wednesday as it was the night before. We probably can wait until tomorrow to sort this out, even though it feels like an urgent major problem. So what he did, because his employees are so committed to their clients, he actually worked with their IT department that between the end of business at night, so 5 p.m., and the start of business the next morning, 9 a.m., two things happen. Number one, employees can't log into their email. They literally cannot access their email to either read or send an email. Number two, any emails that come in from clients, prospects, the outside world, get an autoresponder message that kicks back immediately that says, thank you so much for your communication. We actually shut down our email servers overnight to let them and our employees get undisturbed sleep. We will deliver this email first thing tomorrow morning when we open at 9 a.m. And I can promise you that it will be in the box for the person you've sent it to review first thing tomorrow. When they first rolled this out, their concern was not, will the employees like it or not? Their primary concern was, will our clients be okay with this? They found something very interesting. Number one, not only were clients okay with it, but several clients asked if they could connect the accounting firm's IT person with their IT person to set up a similar model in their business. And that's where I think we have the opportunity. When we lead by example, it creates space for the other people in our universe to say, you know, we should do that too. I have a signature at the bottom of my email that says, P.S. my working hours may not be the same as yours. So please do not feel compelled to respond to this email outside of your normal business hours.
Right.
Because I jump from time zone to time zone. I'm working at different times. I might send an email at 2 a.m. because of where I am in the world. I don't want anyone who's ever receiving an email from me to feel like, oh my gosh, I have to respond right away to Joey. No, not at all. Respond in due course on your own schedule. That's just fine with me.
Yeah. And sometimes you do need to make that clear to people because they don't know what your expectations are.
You know, there's something to be said for having clear boundaries between our work life and our personal life. I think when we think of employee experience and customer experience, they're actually two sides of the same coin. As we improve one and polish one up, the other one increases in value and shine as well. And vice versa. If your employee experience is going down and down, I can almost guarantee that your customer interactions are getting more and more negative as well. This is why I say humans are humans are humans. What do customers want? Well, customers, as a general rule, want the same thing that employees want. They want clarity of communication. They want clear expectation management. If you say you're going to do something, they want you to do it. These are pretty fundamental elements of life interactions with other humans that many businesses seem to lose sight of. I think when it comes to customer experience, one of the biggest challenges that most organizations have is the siloed nature of the corporation or of the organization creates a siloed experience for the customer. Allow me to illustrate that. In most organizations, there is a marketing team who is reaching out to prospective customers saying, come consider us. Look at what we can do. We'll make your life better. We'll take care of you. Then they meet people from the sales team who are like, let's get specific about how we're going to make your life better. And here's how much you're going to have to pay. And this is what you're going to get. And then they get handed off to an account management or delivery team who says, now, what did marketing and sales tell you that I'm going to have to tell you now is not true? And in fact, this is what we're going to do. The siloed nature between marketing, sales, and delivery operations, customer service, whatever you call it at your organization, creates a series of handoffs. And contrary to a baton relay race that we might see in track and field, where we make sure that the other runner in front of us that we're handing the baton to has the baton firmly in their grasp before we let go. In the typical business environment, it's like they're throwing the baton at the person running past them saying, here you go, catch it and try to keep going. This is not a recipe for success. And in the same way that in track and field, if you drop the baton, you are disqualified. You can't just stop and bend down and pick up the baton and start running again. You're literally disqualified from the competition. I would posit that in most organizations, when we drop the relationship with the customer disqualifies us from ever doing business with them again. They haven't felt taken care of. They haven't felt smoothly handed off to the next person. They haven't felt like they matter to our organization.
Yeah, I mean, always the most important thing is to manage your customers' expectations. And getting to the point where you understand what their expectations are sometimes takes longer than whatever is going on in the sales cycle or the marketing cycle. But it would be great if there was communication between all those levels. Although sometimes I don't think that the marketing team necessarily has one-on-one conversations with the sales team before it gets to the implementation and so forth. But I guess that would be education within a big corporate structure. I mean, in a smaller organization, the disparity isn't that obvious, let's put it that way.
I'm not exactly sure, Lynn. I think you're right to a degree that in a bigger organization, it might be easier to see the disparity between the different divisions. But in a smaller organization where somebody maybe has multiple or overlapping responsibilities, I think the disparity we see in those environments is a belief that, well, surely the other person explained this. Surely the other person did a good job. And now we're like, well, wait a second. You never talked about the price. And now we're into the time where we're supposed to be sending an invoice and they have no idea what the price is. I agree with you that a lot of organizations over-index on managing expectations, but they skip the point of exploring expectations, setting expectations, or delivering on expectations. Instead, managing expectations often, I think, gets skewed as, well, you're expecting too much. I'm going to need you to tone it down a little. And it's like, well, wait a second. Why am I expecting too much? Because either your marketing or sales team told me to expect that much, or they didn't tell me that my expectations were well beyond the bounds of reasonable. Which, let's be candid, there are plenty of prospects that come to us with unreasonable expectations. I had a company not too long ago come to me and they're like, Joey, we want you to come in and do a 3-day workshop. I said, oh, this is exciting. I'm a keynote speaker, a workshop leader. This is what I do. Ooh, this is going to be a good conversation. They explained what they were looking for, what we were going to be able to do. They outlined what their desired outcomes were. I mapped that to things that I've done for other clients in the past. I showed them how we do it, how we deliver it. And I have a rule that I never have a conversation with a prospective client without specifically talking about the investment. We talk about the dollars required on the first call because I know it's a concern to every business and every consumer on the planet. So we get to that part of the conversation. I said, now let's talk about the investment. They said, oh, Joey, we're really excited. We have budgeted $500 for this project. Now, you may hear in the background Lynn laughing. Ami has fallen over. They're reviving him, hopefully, for him to come back for the second part of the conversation. What was very clear is there was a stark mismatch between their expectation for what a project like this would cost and my expectation about what the investment would be that would make me willing to do this project. I'm not saying that you couldn't make some progress for $500. I'm just saying it would be with a consultant other than me to help you do that. And that's fine. I have no problem with that. So I think part of this is how are we doing that messaging across all the interactions?
Yeah. And I do think it's educating the people who get a chance to be involved with the setting of the expectations of the borrower. I mean, setting it and managing it, in my mind, were pretty much the same thing. So in our world, everybody wants to borrow money. Well, how long is it going to be? When am I going to close my loan? Well, every situation is going to be different. Every bank that we work with has a different timeline, and it's incumbent on our team to make sure that they set the expectations with the customer based on which bank they're working with, because there's no set time for how quickly a loan can close. There's too many variables. So you need to set their expectations up front and explain to them all the different players that come into play that get to touch the deal that could alter the time frame, and that it's not just you, customer, and me, salesperson, or me, implementer. There's other people involved, and you can't put a timeline on it necessarily. But that's what setting expectations are. Sometimes not knowing.
I totally agree with you, Lynn. And I think a big piece that many organizations miss is the opportunity to educate their prospects and their customers about how things operate. If I'm a brand new customer coming to get a loan from you, Lynn, I may have never done a loan before. Or if I have, maybe I've done 1, 2, maybe 3. You might have done 3 before lunch. And so your worldview on what it takes, what can go right, what can go wrong is going to be exponentially greater than mine. So there's always an opportunity for us to remember we've got to hold our customers' hands. We've got to acclimate them, is the phrase I use in the book, Never Lose a Customer Again. We've got to acclimate them to our way of doing business and what can go right or wrong so that they understand what this relationship is going to be.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's critically important. So, the customer has to know, the employees have to know how to do that, is what I think. And that's
absolutely. And we need to do it uniformly with every prospect and customer. If these things aren't systematized, if they're not detailed and written down in documents that our prospects and customers alike can see, can review, can understand, now we've got a bunch of different people. I might come to you, Lynn, and you say, well, Joey, the timeline, there's 78 things that could impact the timeline. But I may be talking to Ami and he's like, we can get this done by Thursday. Not a problem, Joey. And now I'm not sure who to believe. When the reality is you might both be right because Ami has a clearer understanding of what I'm looking for, what I need. I'm further along in the life cycle in conversations with him. These are things that we need to be doing as leaders, not only to create remarkable experiences for our employees around consistency of messaging and process, but for our prospects and our customers alike, that they have an equally consistent experience across their journey.
I agree.
Sure. So for the last 20 years, I've been teaching companies around the world how to keep their customers and how to keep their employees. I do this in a variety of ways. The easiest way for folks to engage is by picking up Never Lose a Customer Again or Never Lose an Employee Again, one of my 2 books, which outline the principles and philosophies. But I would say the majority of my time is spent delivering keynote presentations at annual meetings, conferences, trade shows, that type of thing, where folks are gathered trying to figure out how do we get better at customer retention or how do we get better at employee retention. And I also do private consulting engagements. I work with about a half a dozen organizations per year where we dive deep into the experiences they are creating for the people they serve, whether those are their customers or their employees. That keeps me plenty busy professionally. On the personal side, I've got 2 young boys. My wife and I love to travel. We love books. We love art. We love building Lego sets. So when I'm not getting the chance to be on podcasts and be on airplanes and be on speeches, I'm building Legos. I'm doing game night. We're doing family reading nights. We're traveling with the family. It creates a wonderful set of experiences in my personal life that give me things to talk about in my professional life as well.
That's terrific. That's great.
Yes, the best place to find me or the books or the information, yes, joeycoleman.com. That's Joey, like a baby kangaroo or a 5-year-old, Coleman, Coleman, like the camping equipment, but no relation, joeycoleman.com. There's information there about keeping your customers, keeping your employees. And what I'll particularly point folks to is if you go to that website, you can download an implementation kit that breaks down the 8 phases of the customer journey, the 8 phases of the employee journey. It allows you to figure out what are we doing in each of these phases in our own business and how can we make them better, with worksheets that you can go over with your team to figure out how can we create those kind of remarkable experiences that will keep people coming back for more.
Well, that's spectacular. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Lynn and Ami. Thanks so much for having me on the show. And thanks to everybody for listening in. I hope you've enjoyed the conversation as much as I have.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.